Hi, good morning everybody. Thank you so much for joining me today on Instagram or on Facebook for our live edition of our plants of the week. So on Thursdays, that's usually what we do. And then on Tuesdays at 9:30, we usually have gardening tips and tricks and all kinds of things like that for you available. So thank you so much for joining us today. Today I'm super excited because we're talking about David Austin roses. Yes, they're finally here. It's really exciting. We have a really good selection. We're going to have even more today, more of a selection. So if you've already been in and seen some of them, we're even bringing out some more. In my hat, I have a couple that I cut this morning. This is a Munstead Wood and a Gertrude Jekyll. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about David Austin's history and how the roses are and how to care for them. David Austin roses are actually a newer rose on the market, believe it or not. Newer in the lifespan of roses. Roses have obviously been around for a very long time. There's antique roses. They have to be around for a certain number of years before they're considered antique. David Austin actually just recently passed away in 2018, and he started really hybridizing his roses and having them come into more popularity in the 50s. He grew up on a farm. He has a really kind of cool background. He grew up on a farm. He became really infatuated with roses when he was in high school by getting a garden magazine and just finding it in the library and just kind of going over it. And he became totally infatuated with the old-fashioned rose style, so the old English style roses. Those are usually very big, double, huge petal count, very open, sometimes cup or chalice shaped, we call them. And at the time that wasn't popular. That in the 50s, it was all about the hybrid teas. So kind of like the traditional long stem rose, red rose style like that. So when he started working with them, people kind of were like, I'm not interested in that. They wanted something more modern. And he was really infatuated with that old rose style. And so what he did was he started hybridizing roses. So he would take the pollen from one and put it onto the stamen of another and collect the seeds from that and start growing just to see what would happen. And one of the coolest things that he said that I always kind of think even applies to regular gardening is that it's a little bit of a mix of science, skill, and plain old luck. So you kind of never know what you're going to get when you're doing something like that. So it was just trial and error and trial and error. What really rose him into popularity was he brought one of his roses to the big garden show, the Chelsea Garden Show that they do in London every single year, and people just became completely infatuated, even though that wasn't really the trend at the time. And that's when it really got the ball rolling for him, and he really started building up steam. And now he has a huge collection of really, really beautiful old-fashioned rose, the English rose style. So that just means that really nice, big, fat petal count. And he has stuff from the bushes all the way up to the climbers, and they're just absolutely beautiful. I have a really great poster here showing some really beautiful examples. Some of the stuff that I really appreciate about David Austin roses is he has a lot of different ones from named from all different kinds of literary backgrounds. So a lot of Shakespeare named roses. There's a Roald Dahl. I have one down here. So if you're a Roald Dahl fan and enjoyed James and the Giant Peach, and it's beautiful because it's a peach rose. So I think that's just really, really appropriate. He's got a lot named after, like I said, Shakespeare characters as well. So it's kind of neat when you're putting together your rose collection because there's so many different ways people and pick and choose what kind of roses they have in their garden, from just matching colors, matching shapes, or if you want to go through and have a whole Shakespeare garden, that's something you can do, which I think is really, really amazing. The nice thing about the Austin roses is they make beautiful, beautiful cut roses. They're really, really showy. They're really, really big. Most of the ones we have don't have any color on them, so I didn't pull anything with color yet. It's still a little bit early. You'll see them in the pots. They do have buds. Some have a couple of colors. I managed to get a couple today. And I think I took a peek at some of the new stuff coming in, and some of that has color on it as well. But they all have really fantastic tags on them that show you a really good representation of what that rose looks like. I'm really impressed with that. Sometimes I look at rose tags of other roses we have here and I think that's not really what it looks like. Sometimes they get faded. That does happen, but they're all their pictures and photos on their roses are really, really true to form, which I find I really appreciate. So when it comes to care, it's pretty similar to just anything else that you grow rose-wise. Roses require full sun. That's one of the biggest things for them. If you get them in too much shade, they start to get very, very leggy and floppy. So full sun's super important. You're going to battle all the similar things that you do with most roses. One of the biggest things for us, because we're so coastal, not everybody, but a big bunch of us included here at the nursery, is we do get a lot of powdery mildew problems and a lot of rust problems. But you can really combat that with good watering practices, which just means you want to water really, really deeply, but infrequently. You never want to get water on the foliage if you can help it. So I actually hand water all of my roses with a hose instead of using my sprinklers. And I water them deeply so the soil gets really, really wet down low, and then I cut it off for a couple of days, and then I do it again. I want the surface of my soil to be dry, but I want the soil down below to be wet. That's the biggest key. Fertilizing is huge. Just like people, roses and all plants are really just like people. They need good nutrients. So the healthier your rose is, the better it is fighting off bugs, just like us. So fertilizing, very important. I really like our down-to-earth fertilizer. It's just the rose and flower fertilizer. I use it once a month religiously. I always try to do it at the beginning of the month, so then that way I don't forget when to do it. When was the last time I've done it? Oh, and if I'm a couple of days late, that's not a big deal. But once a month is really great. And the other thing that I like to use on my roses that I really find works super well is the Malibu Compost Tea. That was the first time I discovered Malibu Compost Tea, was using it on my roses. And it showed me such an instantaneous result that I became an absolute fan of them. I'm a big fangirl of that. So that's really fantastic. And the other thing that they really appreciate, because one of the things we get on roses a lot is aphids and mealybugs and all those little suck-sapping insects, right? So the worm castings or even the worm glow tea works really well. It adds an enzyme to the roses. It brings it up into the plant and it makes it untasty to all those bugs. So it really, really helps me a lot to use that. It's great on all of my plants, but I really use it specifically mostly on my roses and on my citrus because it really helps combat all those problems. And then you do want to cut them down once a year. So usually I cut my roses down in December every single year. And then you want to strip all the foliage off. That's another really big key component. You don't want any of the bugs, rust, black spot, any of that stuff infecting the new petals when they or in the new leaves when they start coming out again, which is usually around February. You'll get a pretty good flush, and you'll even get some flowers. My Austins at home, I have a lady of shallot, and I was gonna pick one and bring it in, and I was rushing out the door and I forgot. I'm kind of bummed, but I have a lady of shallot rose and it's just popping. It's so beautiful. I got some flowers even on my birthday, which was really exciting. Stripping them down and treating them just like any other rose is very important as well. And then because we're live, we are open to questions as well. So if we have any questions, you can drop them down below and we'll get to those questions. If you are watching this later and didn't get to it live, please still leave your questions and we will do our best to get back to those questions for you as well. So do we have any questions, Bimmy?
Yes, we do. Thank you for that awesome info, Sarah.
Yeah.
So the first question we have, are the roses we sell organic?
No, they are not organic. I have actually never in my lifetime seen an organically sold commercial rose. However, we treat them organically here, and all my roses at home are now completely organic because usually they don't use too many inorganic fertilizers and stuff that's going to stay in the plant for very long. So I would say about 2 to 3 months into how you treat your roses will now be that way. So you could take an inorganic plant and treat it with organic things, and eventually now you have an organic rose. Even like sprays and stuff don't really last too long. The systemics are the thing that you have to worry about, but after about 3 months, most of that stuff is out of the rose. You can take an organically grown plant and treat it with systemics, and you've just ruined the whole thing. But we are 100% organic here. We have been so for about 10 years. And I've been saying that for a while. So I think it's like 12 years now, maybe. No systemics here, no Roundup here, none of that stuff. We do everything 100% organically. Soil health is huge, and the only way you can really get great soil health is by doing it organically. And again, I always kind of refer back to humans, but it's like, just like with us, if you give somebody a lot of antibiotics or something like that, you're going to kill all the bad stuff, but you're also going to kill the good stuff. So you got to be really careful with those kind of things. And that's why I've completely stopped doing systemics myself. I've stopped that for about 6 years now. And just really focused it on adding all the good things, the good bacteria, the good fungicides, the good nematodes, and my plants are way healthier than when I was treating them with systemics. So just selfishly, I'm doing that because my plants are better and they flower more and they're just happier. So it does take some practice and some learning, but once you get it down, it's pretty easy actually.
Awesome. Thank you, Sarah. Yeah. So the second question, how often should I spray for black spot?
So black spot is really typically caused from two things. It's either just really, really humid and we have a humid snap and there's kind of nothing you can do to prevent that other than having a healthier rose. Healthier roses will be less susceptible to that. And then poor watering practices, honestly. A lot of people who use sprinklers around their rose where it's kicking up a lot of spray, or they're watering when the water is already evaporating very quickly. So it's creating that mist in the air. Creates that. So the biggest thing to help that is to water early in the morning. Make sure you're not getting that big spray in the air. So I really do suggest hand watering your roses with a hose. It's just way better. If you can't do that though, make sure that you're turning your sprinklers on early in the morning. So I would say like 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock in the morning, making sure that they run for a very long time and then cutting that off. So you don't want to water every day, not even every other day, maybe 2 to 3 times a week, but deep watering. The things that work really well, my favorite arsenal thing that I have in my pocket for whenever I do have problems is the Safer 3-in-1 product. It comes in our green bottle. It's mixed up and ready to go. Sometimes we carry the concentrate. It's fantastic. It has insecticidal soap and it has sulfur in it. So very different than home soap. Never ever use home soap. If I could tell everybody in the world one thing, it would be never use home dish soap on your plants. It might work once or twice, but all of your home dish soap, even if it's organic home dish soap, is technically a degreaser, which is very, very different than essential fatty acid. So that will cause the breakdown of the waxy surface on the leaf. So they all have this waxy protective coating on the leaves, which protects them. And if you're adding dish soap to your plants, that's breaking that down and making them more susceptible to burning and making them more susceptible to pathogens and other things like that. So insecticidal soap, the Safer 3-in-1 has the sulfur that helps really, really well with all the fungal problems. I like that much better than neem oil. I find it works a lot better. Sometimes with black spot too, defoliating your plants, but carefully and gently, and cleaning your hands between each plant. When you get black spot, that leaf's going to fall off no matter what you do. Even if you treat it, the infected leaf is going to turn yellow and you'll just touch it and it'll ping right off the plant. So I suggest taking that all up, making sure you don't leave anything on the ground, and disposing of it. Black spot is thankfully one of the least persistent of all of the funguses that we tend to get. I find that it kind of hits hard and then completely goes away, especially if you're cleaning up your rose. That's one of the big keys on that.
Awesome. Yeah. It looks like you already answered one of the questions that were coming up on dish soap.
Okay.
Someone's asked if you can treat aphids with dish soap. So if not that, what can you treat aphids?
Insecticidal soap. That is the best thing. And let me tell you a trick with the insecticidal soap. So the dish soap, like I said, the problem is they'll use it once or twice and it works, right? But they don't realize it's slowly damaging the plant. So if anything, never, ever, ever put dish soap on any of your plants. Never, ever. Okay. But insecticidal soap is different. It's a totally different kind of animal. It's got a different amino acid chain to it than any other kind of soap, even bar soap that you'll find in your house, right? It's one of my favorite things. And what I do when I find aphids on my plants is the first thing I do is I spray it really hard with a hose. Water is your very best friend in your garden, even to treating even mildew problems. If you spray it really down and you knock it off, it's not going to spread it because they're so soft body, those insects are going to die. With funguses too, if you get it off the leaves of the plants, that's fine. As long as you do it early in the morning, that's really the best time to do it. You don't really want to do this practice at nighttime. You can, but it's not great. You definitely don't want to do it midday because you don't want to run the risk of burning your plants. Water is reflective. Sprays and things can be reflective as well. So I always spray my roses really hard with the hose, and then I wait a day, and then I spray it with my insecticidal soap. So anything that's left over, you want to completely coat it. Insecticidal soap is not a residual spray. So if you spray it on an area where there's no aphid, it's not going to keep aphids from coming to that area. You're trying to cover the aphids or any of the bugs, and you're trying to kill them off by covering them with that. The soap just basically sucks all the moisture from the inside out, which is kind of gross, I know. Neem oil, I find a lot of people use neem oil. I'm not a huge fan of neem oil straight. I don't mind neem oil mixed with insecticidal soap, but straight oil can be a problem. First off, you can really burn your rose because it's just like us. You put an oil on the skin or the surface of something, it's going to burn, right? Also, too, it gets all over your sidewalk. Now your plant's all oily, and then it gets dirty, and it just becomes kind of a... So I very rarely use it. If I do, I never use it straight. The way neem oil works, again, it is covering the body of the insect and it's suffocating them essentially. So it's I like the insecticidal soap too, just in practice, because it tends to dry them out and you don't have to completely cover them and saturate them. So it's a little bit easier to use. And that Rose 3-in-1 works on pretty much everything. So if you've got that one thing, you don't have to do anything special. It works on your rust, your mildew, your black spots, your little aphids, all that kind of stuff as well.
Awesome. Thank you, Sarah. And then another question here is, what is the best type of soil to use for roses?
Okay, so they want really rich, well-draining soil. The very best soil that we sell here, the top of the line soil, is the Malibu brand. It has a lot of really great things in it. It has cow manures and things in there as well. Lots of great mycorrhizae and all kinds of different herb extracts and stuff that help bring in all the beneficial bacteria and nematodes and all that as well. It's great. I love their compost. I use the compost as just a thin layer, almost like mulching my plants once a year. I do the same thing with worm gold. That's a really great product. It's essentially worm castings, which is a fancy word for worm poop, but that's what has all those great enzymes in there that the plants take up. If you're just planting something new, fresh in the ground, you want to dig your hole wider than the plant, but not deeper than the plant. And then you want to take the soil that you've removed from that and mix it 50-50 with a really great compost. So the Malibu compost is great. You're going to pack the soil around the root ball, but you're not going to cover up that root ball. So the root ball is basically the soil that you have in your pot. So if you look at the surface of the soil in the pot, you want to have that level, if not maybe even a hair bit higher than the soil around it. If you start piling all kinds of stuff on that root ball, you're going to suffocate out your plant. So you just got to be really careful about that. As the plant gets established and starts growing outside of that root ball and into the surrounding soil, then you can start mulching on top. But you always want to make sure that you don't mulch way up to the trunk of the plant, because that will create moisture onto a part of the trunk of the tree, or any tree, honestly, that you have, or any plant that it's not used to having. So that can cause some rotting problems to the outside of that. And you want to really make sure you're careful with that as well.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah.
So 2-part question here.
Mm-hmm.
When would you say is the best time to plant roses? And then when should we feed them?
Okay, so I feed all my roses once a month. I usually start once I see a new flush of growth coming out. And typically for me, that's in February. It's going to depend on where you live. But that's when I start fertilizing. Then I typically start slowing down near the end of the year. And I'm typically going up to September-ish, and I'm slowing down a little bit around that time of year. Because I know that they're starting to kind of go into the dormancy. Again, it's going to depend on your climate and where you live as well. And then you're going to be cutting down in December. So you want to really slow down a little bit on that feeding. And then when to plant them, really, we're so lucky. With the exceptions of some super inland areas, we can honestly plant anything year round. It is always better to plant earlier than the season to allow it to have some time to establish than later in the season, especially around summertime. Roses can really struggle getting established, but I've done it and they're fine. So it is something you can continue. In fact, I think I planted my Lady of Shallot in the summertime about 2 years ago, and it established totally well. So you just got to be extra careful. The plant can stress if it's very hot. It can go into shock. You don't want to really jostle your plants around too much. I know a lot of times you'll see people pulling a plant out of the pot and taking all kinds of roots and things off of it and really shaking it up. Only if the plant's super, super, super root bound do you want to do that. Otherwise, you don't want to shake those roots up too much and just add extra stress to it that it doesn't need. And then you want to really be careful about your watering. So when you first plant in the springtime, it's nice and mild and we're still getting a little bit of spring showers here and there. But if you're planting in the summertime, you just really want to be on top of watering. A lot of times when we first get our roses in at the very, very beginning of the year, even sometimes in December, they're going to be just sticks. So you're not going to have any foliage, you're not going to have any buds, it's just sticks. That's a great time to plant to get them kind of slow and established in the ground and start coming into their full bloom. I would say that's the ultimate time to plant a rose.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Sarah. Yeah. There's lots of comments saying great information. Thank you.
Awesome.
So here's a situation.
Okay.
Old roses in very old soil, about 13 years old.
Okay.
What's the best way to give nutrition to the old soil to boost the roses?
So the big thing that I would really use is the Malibu compost. It's a great additive to put on top of the soil, just only a couple of inches or so. And that's going to have a little bit of that cow manure in there, like I said. It's got like nettle and all kinds of things to encourage all the good bacteria. I would do that maybe every 3 months or so. I don't do it that often in my yard because I've got it pretty well established and the soil's really good now. So I probably do it I do it probably twice a year. But making sure that you're using a really good fertilizer. So the down to earth rose and flower is my favorite. I use about a half of a cup to a fourth of a cup, depending on how established my rose is per rose. I put it underneath around the edge, not right up against the trunk. And then I watered in with that Malibu tea. That Malibu tea is magic. I'm telling you, if you haven't tried it, buy one bag. Use it and tell me I'm not telling you the truth because it's so great. And I use that water from the tea to water all the fertilizers down into my rose. My other really big thing with roses is that worm castings. The worm castings really help as well. I would say my roses are 100% spoiled. They probably have the best soil ever. I could probably sell my soil to other people because I've added so much to it and it's so full of nutrients right now.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah.
And so for those who might have come into the live a little later, can you touch on the difference between David Austin roses and others?
So David Austin roses, they're patented roses that David Austin hybridized himself. They are all the Old English roses. That was a style that was really unpopular when he first started it, but man, did he really manage to make it really popular. At the time, it was all about those hybrid teas. And he started crossbreeding with the pollen and the stamens of two different plants and just growing things to see what happened, which I think is really amazing. And he got some really beautiful flowers. Old English roses are roses that have a really high petal count. You can see here they have a huge high petal count. They don't have that tiered kind of bud shape, but very flat. Typically, I have some in my hat as well. They're staying, which is good. I was a little afraid they'd fall out. Usually you don't see a lot of the stamen. Sometimes you can see a little bit of the stamen inside. This is considered more of the chalice, so it's kind of a cupped style rose. And then their colors, the colors of David Austin roses are just absolutely to die for. I have one of the Our Lady of Shallot roses. It's the most beautiful orange apricot-y beautiful. It's more of this open cup style like that. But he has just absolutely cornered that market and just really kind of brought that back into popularity. His roses are all newer. Most of them have been around since the late 40s. into the 80s. That's when he really kind of got a big boom. And it was all from the Chelsea Garden Show. He took some roses to the Chelsea Garden Show that happens in London every single year. And everybody just became completely infatuated. It was just something that was an old-fashioned thing made new again, basically. And the scent on them is really, really great. They usually have a pretty good, decent scent to them. Some of them are more of a tea kind of rose smell. Some are that really kind of heavy smell. And they make a really beautiful, beautiful cut flower because the heads are usually really, really big, which is really great. So they make a great cut flower. That flower style in general, especially if you start looking at things like Pinterest and things like that, have become really, really popular. That's the big, old-fashioned, beautiful, big petal count roses. And so that's our rose of the week, and we have a really great selection, and we're bringing even more out. So if you've already been in the store and seen some of the ones we've had in, we're bringing even some more out. And we do have the Lady of Shout. That's my absolute favorite one. But I did see a couple of those in the back, so we're going to bring those out today. So we'll have those all available for everybody today.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Sarah. On that note, I think we're going to wrap up for the day.
Awesome. Yeah. Okay, cool. Like I said, if you guys have any more questions, put them down below in the comments. You can always feel free to call us. We're here to answer all your questions for you as well. We'll get to some of those questions later if you missed the live stream today. Come in and see us and see all our gorgeous David Austins. Some of them are just starting to flower, which is really fantastic. And be well, be safe, and happy gardening, everybody. Bye.